What's going on? Why don't they like it? We spent $250 million on this.
EA, for some inexplicable reason, has always had this attitude of just throwing money at Bioware's games, Bioware then either making their games chock full of nonsensical gender study drivel or plainly ignoring what their fans want and have been asking for, and then EA just pulling a Pikachu surprised face when the game doesn't sell well, leading them to fire even more of Bioware's employees, and said employees using every excuse under the sun for the game failing, except of course for their own mistakes and creative liberties. Bioware employees have fallen into this weird habit of always blaming their fans, their co-workers, and of course EA for all their failures, but never themselves, never their refusal to take fan feedback into account, and of course never ever the fact they were using their games as vessels for their political propaganda and nonsensical views. Because of course they're not doing that, you're just a bigot for noticing it. So, to the surprise of literally nobody, with the recent announcement that EA is getting bought out, former Bioware writer Patrick Weeks took to Blue Sky to basically cry, "Woe is me, Bioware can't push blatant propaganda anymore," essentially admitting to it and saying the quiet part out loud for everyone to hear. We all knew Bioware had stopped being a studio developing games a long time ago, but they were adamant that this is how Bioware games have always been like, and you're the problem, and you're the one that didn't notice this in previous games, and you're not a real fan, and you're a tourist, and so on. And we have talked about this way back when, that indeed Bioware has always been more progressive than most studios, but they went from progressive to outright, and for lack of a better word, woke. I know the word has been so overused that most people just roll their eyes when they hear the word now and just don't really take it as seriously anymore, but the VEILGUARD cannot be described as anything other than woke. It's like the textbook definition of it. But the fact of the matter is that Bioware got lost in their own sauce. They got so hyper-focused on pushing their socio-political views that they just started building a game around those instead of making a game first and foremost and then incorporating whatever message they wanted to support in a seamless and organic way. They then turned on their own fans, calling them spoiled, brained, tourists, and yes, even fascists. And now they somehow expect the very fans they name called and disappointed time and time again to, I guess, care that the studio might get shut down? Why would we? They've destroyed the games we loved, they called us names for giving them feedback, and they then let their IPs get infiltrated and later on completely annihilated by activists. So excuse us while we simply do not care what happens to a studio and games that are nothing like what we used to know and love. But here's the real question. Is there any hope? Can they turn this around? And what is likely to happen to Bioware? And what will that mean for Mass Effect itself? Let us not mince words here and face this head on. Bioware is more than likely getting shut down, as the writing is on the wall already. They've gone from 500 employees to fewer than 100 in the span of not even a decade, and they recently had even more layoffs after the incredibly successful burning and annihilation of the Dragon Age franchise. Then, they closed their ambassador program, and to be honest, I'm not sure Mass Effect is making it across the finish line in time to change their new overlords' minds about keeping them on life support. Unless of course they get lucky and someone else buys the IP, but then again, that is if, and that's a major if, the new management will be interested in selling this IP in the first place. Not to mention, we have no idea what their contract with EA is. But all this frantic gutting of the studio and trying to stem the tide indicates one of two things. Either they are slowly but surely closing Bioware down, or they're trying to give them one last fighting chance to prove they can make games again to their new management, especially since Bioware is technically kind of EA's only studio still making RPGs, thus their only real chance at competing with similar games. So this is literally their only saving grace. After the acquisition, their new overlords are expected to head the new EA in 2027. So that leaves an incredibly small dev team to come out with a decent Mass Effect game in less than 2 years from now, which, let's be honest, I do not think they're capable of. I mean, they had 10 years, and they gave us Dragon Age the VEILGUARD, and that was supposed to be the best version of the game they could churn out. But here's the thing, they had managed to make a good game in 14 to 16 months before. I'm of course talking about Dragon Age 2, which despite its flaws, it was still a somewhat decent game, given the incredibly small development cycle, and when compared to Dragon Age the VEILGUARD, Dragon Age 2 was a masterpiece. Because yeah, the graphics weren't as good, there were lots of loading screens, reused environments, and so on, but the heart of the game was still there. Sure, there were some minor lore changes here and there due to the rushed development cycle, but you could still tell you were playing a Dragon Age game at least. But I know people will say, well, that's a different team. And yeah, you're right, but the Mass Effect team that had the same amount of time to make a Mass Effect game came up with Andromeda. Which just... yeah. The game had a supposedly 5-year development cycle, but was only actively worked on for almost 18 months out of those 5 years. So Bioware will be working against the clock, with not even half of its original workforce, with most of the original talent having walked out or been fired, with less than 2 years before the new management takes over, and after the majority of gamers have had their faith in Bioware not just shaken, but completely destroyed, meaning Bioware will in a way be fighting themselves as well, because they will be fighting against their own recent reputation. Plus, they are so out of touch with what the original fans loved about their games that Mark Dara somehow thinks that should the new owners of EA force Bioware to stop with their pandering, there will be significant public backlash. Like, what? Fans only complained when you made your pandering blatant and not seamless anymore. Why would they complain if someone told you to stop the political activism and go back to making games again? Not to mention the decades worth of ignoring fan feedback. So even if they can somehow convince the new management to give them yet another chance, can they convince their old fans, who by the way have long since given up on them, as well as the newcomers to the franchise, to give them another chance after the repeated failures of theirs over the last few years, and especially after the VEILGUARD? I seriously doubt that. Bioware will now forever be the VEILGUARD studio, the I'm non-binary studio, the studio that just gone off the deep end of this ideology. It has been memed so much that I seriously doubt they can come back from that. Nostalgia is of course a formidable driving force when it comes to whether someone will buy a product or not, but when that original product you're longing for doesn't even exist and or has been desecrated and destroyed from within, reality kicks in really fast. Nostalgia baiting has worked for a long time, but people are beginning to wake up, so I'm not sure even nostalgia can help Bioware out of the hole they've dug themselves in. So we have to be realistic here and realize that Mass Effect doesn't really stand the best of chances here as it is. And to top it all off, most of the original talent that created and worked on the Mass Effect universe has either walked away or been fired. So why would we have any faith in the political activists masquerading as game devs over at modern Bioware today? And I know a lot of people will say, yeah, but Mike Gamble is still on the team. Yeah, he was still on the team when they made Andromeda as well, so that doesn't really mean much to me. Not to mention that we got a formal announcement back in 2020 that Mass Effect will continue. That was 5 whole years ago, by the way, but the game only started production in 2023, and it has been in pre-production ever since, with radio silence on all fronts. So once again, we see them following the same vicious cycle and pattern of the same development hell we have come to expect of them for most of their games. So how can one expect Mass Effect to be any different when Bioware seems to be doing the same exact mistakes they have been making for the last few years with all of their failures? That's not just illogical to me, it's really borderline crazy to expect anything to change here. Another disadvantage is where can the game realistically go that will satisfy both old fans, Andromeda fans, and newcomers to the franchise as well? What new enemy can be more threatening than the Reapers? What about Shepard? Are we going to make the Destroy ending canon and let Shep leave? What about the backlash from the people who chose the other endings? No matter which ending you make canon, the rest will complain because once again, Bioware will be taking player choice and throwing it out of the window completely disregarding it in order to make whatever they want to make. And they've already seen how people react when you disregard any and all previous choices. Mass Effect had the potential of becoming Bioware's Halo, meaning they could have had multiple games with the same protagonist, but they chose to make a new protagonist with Andromeda and make Mass Effect into this cartoony Guardians of the Galaxy mess that never took itself seriously, disrespecting their previous games along with their fans. So yeah, choices were made and consequences have to be faced.
I think I really pissed that one off. Maybe because I shot him in the face.
I threw a rock at him.
In my heart of hearts, I'd love for nothing more than seeing Shepard again and maybe the old gang back together for at least one more adventure. Realistically though, I know that this is no longer possible and that it is best to have zero expectations. And what is more, if there is even a chance of the next Mass Effect game being even 1% like the VEILGUARD, then I'm sorry, but I hope EA shuts down Bioware before that. I love the franchise and its characters way too much to even risk them getting the VEILGUARD treatment. As for Bioware, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, but fool me 3 times, shame on both of us. Shame on you for your lack of responsibility to address the issue and stop taking advantage of people, and shame on me for my lack of awareness and crawling back to you every time you dangle nostalgia bait in my face. The reality here is that Bioware has gotten away with this type of behavior one too many times, and I do not think they can keep getting away with it. You know, we have a saying in my country about how a thief can only get away with something twice. It goes something like, he got away with it once, he got away with it twice, but the third time, we got him, meaning we caught him. And I feel like Bioware has had 3 strikes. They made Andromeda, they made Anthem, and were even allowed to make the VEILGUARD. So if anything, they got away with it 3 times. Honestly, 4 if you count Mass Effect 3's atrocious ending as well. So instead of counting their blessings and course correcting in a timely manner to try and salvage any semblance of their previous success and reputation, they not only chose to double down on their absurd attitude, but they also decided they could become even worse as well. So, to be honest, I don't even want to risk this. I don't even want a new Mass Effect installment. Andromeda was bad enough. We do not need to see another beloved franchise get disrespected, annihilated, and shelved for God knows how long, or possibly forever, after it flops so hard it becomes a meme with both old fans and newcomers to the franchise yet again. So, if you're asking me what they should do with the new Mass Effect before it is too late?
If you are undecided, it is not too late to throw her out the airlock.
And let us remember the original trilogy as the only installments the game ever got.